Okay. Good evening, everyone. Alicia, we all set for the recordings?
Yep, we're ready to go.
Okay. This is the Hideout Town Council regular meeting and public hearing of November 14th, 2024. This meeting is in person at the Hideout Town Hall for those who want to attend. Otherwise, it is electronically presented on both YouTube and Zoom. I'm going to call this meeting to order. And I'm going to take roll. So Chris Beyer. You there, Chris?
Chris, you're muted.
Yeah, I'll come back. Carol Hazelton.
I'm here.
Thank you. Nice to hear you, Carol. Jonathan.
Right here.
Thank you. Ralph.
I'm here.
All right. Bob is excused for work purposes. He's working tonight. I'll try again. Chris Beyer. Need to hear you speak. Chris, you're not on mute, so can you speak?
He's having some technical difficulties. She'll call in with her phone.
Okay. We do have a quorum with the other three. Is it okay to proceed, Polly, or do I need to wait for her?
You can proceed.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
You can proceed.
Thank you. Okay, first item on the agenda is public input. This is floor open for any attendee to speak on items not listed on the agenda. The way you do that is you use your raise your hand functionality within Zoom. Unless you're exclusively on a phone, in which case it is *9, I think. Alicia?
Yes, correct.
*9. Okay. I don't see any hands up for the moment.
Hey, Phil, I would just say, I'll make one comment. Thanks for everyone for coming last night to town hall. And I thought it was well attended. And I think, myself, JD, Jonathan from the committee, it also includes other folks, but Carol was there. And, just really thanks to the public to make it kind of a nice event, a friendly event, a cooperative event, so to speak. And everyone got a chance to kind of take their get their vote in using these red stickums, and thought it went over well.
Well, good. Sorry I couldn't be
Most
there.
of all, thanks for everybody attending from town. That's really the piece that's probably most important to thank.
Sorry I
Thank
couldn't
people.
be there, but as you know, I'm currently in hospital, so
You were there in spirit, Phil. So,
it
no
is.
doubt.
Anyway, all right. Thank you, Ralph. I don't see any other hands, so I'm going to close public input and we're going to move to a public hearing. So this is consideration of a possible approval of a lot combination in the Soaring Hawk subdivision, lots 65 and 66. And I'm going to let Thomas take us through this, if I can make it big enough to actually see.
Mayor, do you want to just double check that Chris can, she should be on the phone now, I believe.
Okay, Chris Beyer, are you here? She has to unmute by using *9, does she? Or what? No, *6. What do we do?
Yeah.
I am here.
Oh,
Star
there you
6.
are. Okay. Thank you, Chris.
Sorry about that.
It is quite okay. not easy when you're traveling to try and get everything going here. All right, Thomas, would you like
Thanks,
to
Mayor.
take us through this?
Sure, I'll walk you through this. This is a pretty straightforward amendment to subdivision. It's an application for a lot combination in Soaring Hawk. This is for the combination of lots 65 and 66. The lot sizes are noted there, 0.25 acres for lot 65. Lot 66 is about 2.22. So this would create a single lot that's almost a half an acre. This is
Sorry,
zone
sorry, just to correct, you said 2.22. I think you meant 0.22.
0.22, sorry. Yes. Yep. So it
Just for
would
the record.
total about a half an acre once combined. It's in the R SPA, the Resort Specially Planned Area Zoning District with the
I will be back.
with a resort village high density pod overlay. So there are no required setbacks pursuant to the fact that it's zoned R SPA. That's part of the MDA zoning, and so the setbacks are done at time of HOA Design Review Committee review. But there are 6-foot setbacks for public utility easements along all of the property lines. So those are noted on the plat. You'll note there that there is no building height, again, because it's part of the R SPA and the MDA, but comparable building height maximums would be 35 feet. That's typically, I think, what the DRC, the HOA's private DRC is recommending out there. That would be our recommendation as part of this lot combination, that it maintain no higher than 35 feet. You could see on that next image, those are the two lots. That arrow points to the lot line that would be removed. So it's kind of on the corner of Black Hawk Way and what is that, White Tail, I think.
Yeah.
And if you go down just a little bit more, we'll walk through a couple of recommendations relative to this combination. We have some conditions noted here. The maximum house size square feet can only be increased up to 125% of what is currently allowed on lot 65. This is limited by the master HOA, so that's just a condition we would recommend as part of the resolution. Number 2 does make a recommendation for incorporating some setbacks here. So a minimum of 20-foot front yard setback, 15 feet on the sides, and a 20-foot rear yard setback. Pretty common in the area, but we just wanted to get that in as a condition because it is only done by PUE, public utility easements, per the plat. If you go to number 3, it is, Whitetail Court and Black Hawk Way. We would recommend that only one curb cut for a single driveway be permitted. This is located on the corner, so out of safety, we would recommend that it be located as far as possible from the intersection. No additional parking pads or areas for storage would be permitted as part of the combination. No additional accessory structures beyond what is allowed pursuant to the existing town code. Number 6, the applicant must adhere to the requirements of the master HOA, including the design review committee. The topography and existing vegetation must remain undisturbed except for where construction takes place within the limits of disturbance fencing. And number 8 is the applicant, in conjunction with town staff, must confirm that the middle line that's being removed, that it does have a 6-foot utility easement on one side, 6 feet on the other. They must confirm with their engineer and, of course, town staff, our engineer, that no utilities are currently running down that utility easement before that is vacated. If there are utilities there, that would not be vacated, which would present a bit of a problem for them if they wanted to build over that line. But it's our understanding there are no utility lines there. And Gordon and I had discussed one additional condition we would put in as number 9, and that is that if there are duplicate utility stubs in the right of way, that they would remove the unused stub. Those were our conditions. The Planning Commission heard this at the October 17th Planning Commission meeting, and they voted to favorably recommend the lot combination to you. There is a there are a couple of exhibits. That's the existing conditions. You can see the lot line going down the property. And the next image is that lot with no lot line. That would be the plat that would be recorded with Wasatch County Recorder's Office. And then after this, there is a resolution with the findings of fact, the conclusions of law, and the conditions of approval that I outlined. Pretty straightforward in terms of its content, but the conditions that I outlined for you all, which are probably the most pertinent from our perspective, are actually included within the conditions at the tail end of this resolution. I can go through this in detail if you want, but this really outlines the existing conditions on the ground for the findings of fact when the subdivision was recorded, et cetera. Then we get into some conclusions of law that are requirements relative to our town code, and then the conditions of approval are on the next page, Mayor. And again, those are what I outlined. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Again, this one is pretty straightforward, but happy to go through any detail or clarifying.
So let's clarify I have no issue with what Gordon recommended. I just don't see it. It doesn't seem to be appearing in here. So what do we do?
I would have to add that in as the final condition there at number 18.
Okay, so if we were to approve this, we were to approve this,
I
but
could give
to include a condition regarding no duplicate utility stubs.
That's right. If there are duplicate utility stubs, the applicant must remove the unused utility stub.
I have a couple questions. If
That
I
would be the only. Sure.
So my first question is, if we're going to be potentially deciding that the utility easements are abandoned if they're not in use, are we sure that Rocky Mountain Power and or Comcast are not going to be needing or planning on using those?
We can reach out to them to get their input, but typically as long as there are additional utility easements along that are perpendicular to the right of way, and there are in this location, they have different avenues to get to the property behind these lots. So you could see there that the subdivision for Soaring Hawk has utility easements along all property lines. So I don't have the ability to annotate, but for example, if you look at the very top of this property, right where the mayor's got his cursor, you could see that there is a 6-foot utility easement on the kind of the south side on the property, the subject property. That also exists on the north side. If you go to the lot line just to the north of their mayor, the neighbor's lot right up there, yep, they've got also a 6-foot utility easement on their property and a 6-foot on the neighbors. So Rocky Mountain Power has different avenues if they needed to get into the center of this development, which is primarily privately owned HOA common area trails.
Okay, I just don't want to create problems. And then my second question is, are we intending, and I'm personally in favor of this, of limiting the structure height to 35 feet? Because I did not see that in the conditions.
We are, and that didn't make it in the condition number 2. So we should probably add that in as a final condition as well. That one did not get included. That is in alignment, just so you are aware, with the HOA's DRC to limit to 35 feet. But you're right, let's put it in here because this is an amendment to subdivision. So we would add that at the tail end as well, Mayor. I think that would go under conditions of approval, house a limit of 35 feet for the structure.
Any other questions for Thomas on this proposal? Okay, anybody from public want to talk about this proposal? Anybody have any issues or questions for clarity? Again, the process is raise your hand. using the functionality or *9 on your phone. So I'm opening, just to be clear, I've opened this for public comment. And I don't see anything. Okay, so I'm going to close, because it's public hearing, I'm going to close the public hearing portion on this and come back to see if anyone wants to make a resolution approving a subdivision amendment for lots 65 and 66 in the Soaring Hawk subdivision. With the language here, plus the addition of language confirming the 35-foot height restriction and the condition describing that if there are duplicate stubs as a result of the combination, that those duplicate stubs be properly closed.
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you,
I'll
John.
second.
Thank you, Carol. Okay. Ralph?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Yes.
Thank you. Carol?
Yes.
And Jonathan?
Yes.
Okay. So the motion passes, the resolution is adopted, and the Soaring Hawk combination of lots 65 and 66 are allowed, given, inside the conditions described tonight. So thank you. Let me go up to the top, if I could figure out how to get to the top. Because I don't know what's going on here. This thing is fighting me. There we go. So now we're going to move to the agenda items. Number 1 is consideration to authorize the mayor to enter into an amendment in the MITRE interlocal agreement, which will allow for certain sales tax revenues to be paid to the municipal service fund. I'm going to I'm going to ask Polly to explain this. But basically this, if you remember when we did the Deer Springs discussion, there was an agreement that a portion of the MITRE taxes would be allowed to be moved into our everyday municipal fund and not reserved to the development fund. So Polly, go for it.
So, yeah, as a result of amending that MDA, we spoke with MITA, and MITA offered, well, in order to allow for it, we needed to amend the ILA, which is what you see before you. It's a very short amendment. What MITA also agreed to do was make this apply to all projects going forward that fall under these circumstances where the person has elected to belong to MITA and or the developer, and they are within the MITA area. And I believe we have Rob Sant on the phone who can go over the benefits of that. And I don't know, Jan, if you wanted to present anything, or why don't we have those? And then if there are any questions that I can answer, I'd be happy to.
Perfect. Thanks, Polly. Yeah, so this first slide, this shows what how the split worked in the MITA area according to the original interlocal agreement. So property tax is split 75% goes to the development fund, 25% goes to the taxing entities. And then the development fund, in addition to the property tax allocation, also had the sales tax and the resort tax. And those funds were split 70% remained with for project area improvements, and 30% goes to reimburse any property owner for infrastructure expenses they put into their development. And then that 70% of the development fund is split 50-50. And then the municipal services fund had the 25% property tax, transient room tax, telephone tax, and energy tax. And as a reminder, development fund has to be spent to improve the project area. And municipal services funds, the interlocal agreement specifies that the town is required to provide municipal services in the MIDA zone, but anything else they do with that money is up to the town. So then the next page, this shows what the current agreement looks like now. So now you'll notice in the development fund, it is just the property, 75% of the property tax allocation, and that's still split 70-30, and then the 70% is split 50-50. And then the municipal services fund, now we've also added the resort community tax, which is 1.1%, and the sales tax, which is 1%, but then that is split off of population and point of sale. So the resort tax and the sales tax, that's a tax that is on any sales transaction in the town, not just tied to rooms. And then the transient room tax is an additional tax that's tied to rooms. So once any other commercial is developed in the MIDA area, that 1.1% of the resort community tax and the 1% of the sales tax will be an additional benefit that will go to the town that before this amendment would have gone to the development fund. One quick note to mention, the sales tax, the 30-70 split, if you remember, Nate agreed to give us his 30% portion of the sales tax and the resort community tax in order to get those nightly rentals. But although we still get the MIDA's 35% portion of sales tax and resort tax outside of Nate's of Deer Springs, any of those commercial developments, the property owner would still get their 30%. That's one note to also mention. Then on the next page is kind of a
Can
breakdown.
I just jump in,
Yeah,
Rob?
of course.
Sorry to, just on that point, that's only for the ones where we already have signed contracts, but moving forward, this, what you just laid out is what would apply for any
Perfect.
future.
Perfect. So this kind of just a quick breakdown of the Deer Springs development, because that's what we know right now. So the first column is what the original interlocal agreement revenue would have produced at that 35%. So 1.3 million or $34,000 a year. Again, that also would have had to have gone to improving development in the MIDA area. And now the amended agreement is that number jumps up to 3.8 million or an annual average of just under $100,000 a year. And as mentioned, that just goes to the municipal services fund. So it just goes to the town's general fund to do what you would like with it. And then the TRT tax, that always has been part of that municipal services revenue fund and will continue to be. And so that's 2.4 million or 60,000 a year. And this is at a 35% occupancy rate and with half of the units being nightly rentals. And so your total municipal services fund revenue with this amendment is 6.3 million or just over $150,000 a year in annual revenue. And also just as a note, you'll notice that these revenues do include MIDA. No matter what, all the funds in a MIDA area, they get a 10% of any fund that goes towards administering the project area. So these numbers do reflect that 10% reduction. Any questions on that?
Yeah, Rob, this is Ralph. Thanks for all you do and putting numbers together as well. So we're in phase one at this point. What are do we have any actuals against projections here?
I'm not sure if we have actuals yet. A lot of those, I don't know, Jan could answer that more than I could.
I mean, the numbers look good the way I see it, that it gives us a lot more flexibility. But I'm just trying to see, are we actually seeing something here, or it's just numbers on a screen, so to speak?
I think for the most point, yeah, right now it's just numbers on the screen as a future benefit. And this, the amendment goes into place starting January 1. So any money that we would receive would have just gone to that development fund.
And can you go back to the previous slide. Yeah, so in this case, the development fund split, the fourth bar chart where it says property owner, 30%, 70% project area. In the case of Deer Springs, that's 100% to us. So that's a true 50-50 split. Is that the way I'm reading that?
So that's just for the property tax. So the property tax is split. 30 goes to Nate, 70% goes to,
But he's giving us the 30%.
not for the property tax. He's giving us the 30% of the sales tax and resort tax. So he's keeping the property tax benefit.
Okay.
So
Thank
what
you for
he's
that.
agreed is give
Yeah.
us the 30% of his resort community tax and sales tax.
Okay. And the resort is 1.1.
Yeah, 1.1. So really, you're probably looking, it's pretty rare for a town or a city to get that full 1% of sales tax, just because if you remember, half of it goes to the state to be distributed by population. And so most cities and towns get between 0.5 and 0.9 typically.
So go back to the chart we were just looking at. So I know you do great estimations here. So that difference is actually resulting in that much change from, call it, what is it, 976 to
Yeah, because you were receiving 35%, and now you're getting an increase of 65% of those revenues, an additional 65%. Which
okay,
that looks like, that's about the difference between 97 and 34. So
gotcha. Okay. Because those are pretty significant numbers, but we don't have any actuals.
I don't believe so.
I mean, it's,
I think-
all of these decisions when we did this, Ralph, were based on, projected usage of the properties. But, the point being that this agreement benefits us versus the prior agreement. So
Yep.
it's to our advantage, whatever the volume of
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
is to think about
Agreed.
adopting
Yeah.
it. So,
Yep.
I just trying to see where how we're looking at the numbers and how much.
And my guess too, Ralph, is those numbers, if we did have actuals, they'd be a little low. I think the town's really going to see a benefit of these nightly rentals once Mayflower's open and you get a little more tourism activity on that side of the mountain.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, those were my primary questions. Thanks.
So I have a question. As I understand it, the net to the town is positive, which is a good thing. Are there any negatives, or are there any additional responsibilities? As I recall, the town plows the roads up there, but they pay us to do it. Are there any negatives? Meaning, I see lots of positives on this chart. Are there any additional costs or responsibilities, or is it all net positive?
No, because those costs haven't changed. So no matter what, the MIDA agreement, the town was still required to provide all the municipal services. You just had less funds to do it. So this just gives more funds to provide those municipal services. So the costs won't increase. The costs are the same regardless of the agreement. This just gives the town more general fund revenue. So I think it's a win no matter how you look at it.
Okay. So regardless of whether the numbers are accurate or not, it's net positive to some degree to the town. Is that
Correct.
fair?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And it's pretty
Even if
rare
it's
for
a-
MIDA to do this as well.
Okay.
What was that last piece, Rob? Sorry.
I think it's pretty rare for MIDA to do this. It's most of the other project areas, they've used all of the funds that they've allocated for their bonding purposes. But since Hideout wasn't really built when they did the bonding for Mayflower, they don't really have an obligation to use our revenue. So that's why they're kind of willing to consider this amendment. Whereas in Wasatch County, they just entered one for the Sundance Resort. And then up in Davis County, it's pretty set in stone that all of the agreements that they've agreed to fund in the current buckets are not negotiable to amend. So I think this is a pretty good thing for the town.
Yeah, sounds it.
agreed. Any more questions for Rob? So this is the language. Polly, I don't know if there's anything you want to go through in this.
No, I've reviewed it and I've compared it to the original MDA and I think it looks good. And just in terms of process, originally we were hoping that the MITA board meeting would be in December. It sounds like it got pushed until January, but they wanted us to pass this first, so, and then they'll consider it at their next board meeting, but I don't expect any issues with it with the MITA board.
One other thing I would note, and Jen, I don't know if you've or anybody else has talked to Nate, but we want to ensure that Nate also is going to amend his agreement with MIDA, giving us that 30%. That's something that we'll also need to
I think
ensure.
he has,
Okay, perfect.
and this was just the final piece so that we could get the money. But
Perfect.
I'll confirm that, but that's my recollection.
It's my recollection as well, Polly, that he has.
Perfect.
If that's the case, do we want to add an additional whereas that indicating that whereas Nate has amended his agreement with Maya?
No,
I
we
don't
want
think we
this.
can. Yeah.
We want to move forward we don't want to change anything.
And I think this agreement is just between MIDA and yes, I don't know if I'd agree with Polly.
Yeah, we've negotiated a pretty good deal. I'm confident that Nate's done his part. I'm confident that he has.
Yeah, I mean, just to explain, um, council member Gunn, this is all gravy for the town. So even if Nate didn't sign his, we still would want this agreement. So,
Thank you.
Okay, so if I remember correctly, the language in this discussion is consideration to authorize the mayor to enter into an amendment as described this evening with MIDA for certain sales taxes to be paid to the Municipal Services Fund. So this is simply a motion to authorize the mayor to go ahead and sign this amendment.
Also move.
So moved.
I'm sorry. There were two moves. Who was the first one? I didn't catch that.
Well, I said so move, but I don't know who else said, but they were about the same time.
Chris
One,
did.
one. Oh,
No, I'll do the second.
Thank you, Chris. Okay. Carol,
Yes.
thank you. Jonathan,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
and Ralph.
yes.
Okay, motion carries. We're happy with this one. We'll get this signed and get going. So by January 1st, we're in the position to collect more revenue. I agree with Jonathan on his one point, which is, or Ralph, we need to see visibly, at least quarterly, the nightly rental revenues. We need to understand what it's doing for us. And I know the finance people are recording them. We just need to get them in front of the council on a regular basis.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Phil, in our, if you look at the previous note, when we get to the meeting minutes, we wanted to get better at that, and we were supposed to
Yeah,
look at, some additional ways to understand best practices in that regard. So when we get to that later, but that's it, we
Yeah.
need to monitor this better.
we need to get this, we need to get we're supposed to be doing this quarterly. It's been a while. But certainly the third quarter is come and gone. So let's make sure we get the third quarter in front of us for next month, no later. So I guess, I don't know who's on from finance, but Jan, I guess I'm going to ask you to take that one and make sure it happens.
I'm all over it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, item 2 is consideration of possible approval for a resolution adopting engineering standard specifications and drawing manual. So this is something that Gordon has been working on. to get, as we continue to evolve and clean up our engineering standards. Gordon's done a lot of work on this, so I'll let him cover this for you. I think he's on tonight, so Gordon, you want to take us through what you've been working on here?
Sure. Thank you. So I'll speak generally first. The standards and specifications currently are embedded in the code, in code format, and it's difficult for engineering specifications. That's a difficult format. The development community doesn't like it. It's hard to navigate. It's hard to find things. And so generally, the approach that I've taken here is to embody all of the standards and specifications in a manual, and then they would be codified by reference. So that's the approach. So we'd have to, Polly, I don't know if we adopt this tonight, what does that do to what's existing in the code?
There's a statement in the adoption that it supersedes, what was this in the resolution? We said that this would repeal and replace anything.
Oh, okay.
And you and I can go through, if there's stuff already in the code, we can bring next month just to clean up so that there's no confusion with the code, what items should get removed.
All right, great. So then it's just standardization of a lot of things. So there's a lot of stuff here. So
Yeah,
happy to
stuff.
Yeah, I'm happy to entertain questions. But I'll bring a couple things to your attention. If you could go to, you're scrolling through, so I'll let you keep the screen. If you could go to Standard Plan ST4, it's the one that shows those street cross sections, 3 of them stacked.
Is that in the appendix or up in the?
Appendix, yeah, scroll down. Standard plans there. So just keep go there, that one.
Oh, okay.
And
yeah, 3 of them stacked. Yeah, gotcha.
Yes. So zoom in on the local access road.
Okay.
And while I'm thinking about it, there's a standard plat in there now. It's got a lot of boilerplate language, and Polly's reviewed that. Those are just good things to have on a plat, and it's also good to have a standard plat template that has the same title block, so that all of us know where we're signing and who's signing and where to look for things. But with this is probably the most significant change. Right now, and I don't have it off the top of my head. Maybe Thomas knows the number. I should know the number. I apologize. But essentially what I've done is I've widened the street ever so slightly. And I've added high back curb. So with regard to the width, the fire code requires that you have at least 32 feet of traversable pavement in order to have parking on both sides of the road. And in Hideout, we've had, there's a lot of difficulty with the narrow streets, a lot of issues with parking. And this typical section here, so what do we have here? We've got 24, 30, and then each one of those pans is foot and a half. So there's 33 feet here of traversable pavement. And so it's still a very relatively narrow street, but pursuant to the fire code, that allows to have parking on both sides. And in my judgment, that's a good place to be, to eliminate the issues with parking and still have a safe road. The side treatments are just left 12 feet, but another typical section shows 5 feet of park strip and 5 feet of sidewalk. So this is the one that I'd really like the council to be keenly aware of. And then other than this, if we could go to the end of the document, Mayor, and look at the light, the street light. I think it's right at the very bottom. I think it's like the last page.
There it is. There it
Yeah,
is.
and so if you could zoom out so the council can see the whole picture. Right now, the town doesn't seem to have a standard street light. I got this from Dan, Public Works Director. He said it's one that had been used. And so that's the one that that's the one that I've presented here. It's dark sky compliant. You see it's full cutoff. And then it's the location of these lights, that's stated elsewhere in the document. They would be placed at intersections and significant bends in the road. In my view, that's a healthy balance between safety and dark sky. I could go on about a lot of different things. And so it really depends at this point where, the rest of this is fairly standard type stuff that you would find in a city. And so I guess at this point I would entertain questions.
But just let me jump in and thank Gordon for all his effort on this. This is where we've been trying to get to and have finally gotten to with this proposal, to have all of the things that needed to be addressed by builders in building a subdivision in here. The streetlight one is a great example because we've got at least 2 other types of streetlights in the town, possibly 3. And so, we never did anything about it. And so they all put in what they wanted. So we've got some randomness in there. We've got the same thing, as you know, we got multiple road widths. The last time we did this, it was 29 feet of pavement. This one is 30 feet for the minor road. So we're trying to get everything going forward aligned with where we want to be, and then as the need to replace comes in other subdivisions, we can cite that the new standards are X. And so I think this is a really powerful tool, and I thank Gordon for all his efforts on it.
So now that you mentioned that, Mayor, while you were talking, a couple other things came to mind. I mentioned something about the high back curb, but I want to emphasize that the high back curb is a change. I think throughout Hideout, there's more of a rolled curb.
Yep.
I like the high back curb. It's certainly better for stormwater conveyance. Um, it's better for snow plowing. The snow plows, they can kind of use it as a guide. They can bump into it and know that's it. Whereas the rolled curb, their plow can go over it and they don't know it. In my view, the only downside is you can't drive over it anywhere, and that's a positive and a negative. Not sure we want to be driving over the curb everywhere. Uh, so that's the positive. The negative is you do have to cut in a curb cut, but that's a couple $100, and you know the developers and the contractors are very familiar with doing that. One other aspect, if we could go to the early on in the document, please, Mayor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so scroll down, please. So, okay, stop right there. So the early portion of this document is about legalities and process. So we've got definitions. That's important from a legal standpoint. Right there in that section, we've got the town engineer's authority spelled out. That's important. Polly's reviewed this. We have a really important part that tells the developer and their engineer exactly what they need to submit in order to have a complete application. And I can't remember whether that's above this or below it. I guess it's below it. Yeah. So if we could go just to the top of this section. Right there, submittals. So this section is critically important. This is where the town communicates to the development community exactly what they need to submit and in what format in order to have a complete submittal. And I've got checklists. We reference the checklist here, but purposely I haven't put the checklist here because I don't want the checklist. I don't recommend that the checklist be codified. The checklist needs to be a little more nimble than that. So there's a checklist that will bounce back and forth with each submittal between the town and the developer, so they know what they need to submit, and with each resubmittal and review, they know how they're doing in terms of addressing comments and so forth. So so now I can happy to entertain questions.
Gordon, is this light design that you showed us tonight, is that a design that's available from multiple vendors, or are we locking people into a sole source kind of situation?
I don't know. It was the one that Dan gave me and said that it's one that he had a standard for that had been used.
It is a a standard offering. It's not a single vendor offering. It's something that's out there on the market. Like you can get pretty much the same light at Lowe's and Home Depot. You can get the same light from multiple guys. So we didn't have anything special done, unlike the top of the hill here where we've got those mining lamp looking things. Those are custom made. And we still haven't found anybody to replace them. I know they're a really interesting look, wagon train kind of look, but we'd have to go out and get them custom made if we're going to replace them.
Okay, that's a good thing. And my second thought is, I got this document just a couple hours before today's meeting, and I'm having trouble understanding exactly what we're changing. I understand codification of existing requirements or changing the process, but I'm having trouble making an informed decision because I, first off, I have a little difficulty understanding this material because I'm not an engineer, but secondly, I'd like to know exactly what we're changing so that I can make an informed decision. Is there a way that we can, outline the major changes here such that, us non-engineers can understand them?
Well, so that's a good question. It's practically a wholesale change. The drainage standards are very similar. And that's probably not accurate to say that it's a wholesale change either. I haven't done a side-by-side comparison with what's in the code compared to what's here. So that would be quite an effort. I would prefer the approach to be to just go through this document and say what we like or what we don't like.
Can I add to Jonathan here a bit, even for us who are maybe a little bit more technical and have some background in this? I would say I'd like to see something in a comments side by side, add a comment section to this. What's the impact? So, particularly for pieces of code, I understand it might look ridiculous in a red line scenario, but for the major pieces, I'd like to see what the impacts are to anything existing, or does this only apply to the future? So what are the impacts? What are the impacts by major section? So the
Okay,
local
so
access road,
with
garden.
the side-by-side idea, I think the side-by-side idea is impossible because this is what we have here is much more complete than what's in the existing town code. What I could do is go through the existing town code and just identify what's retained and what's not. They're so
Yeah, the formats are so different. I mean, you have to put the code beside, this is a list of tasks, if you will, things you have to do, and the code talks about a bunch of other stuff. So I think that would be hard to do. I think is Gordon's proposal of let's go section by section and we'll either tell you it's new or comes from, section 12B. And in that section, it talked about these three things, but it left these other five things out, and we're putting those in.
yeah.
That's what
So
would be
what I
useful.
do is I'd go through the existing town code and I'd use that and say what happened to that, whatever that particular section, whether it was retained or not. As far as impact, Councilmember Severini, I don't know. I need more clarification on what you mean by impact. Certainly, this is only a document going forward. We can't enforce this on the past. And so I need more clarification on what you mean by impact.
Yeah, so impact would be if there are elements of additional cost, if there are elements of additional benefits, those are
Lots of benefits.
impactful. Yeah. So if you widen the road, the obvious impact would be you can get more vehicles through there. You can do more parking, to your point previously. So that's what I was looking for, like a comments. It's just like you would do a delta on a dock, but just use that as a place for the most important areas of the changes that reflect benefits and/or either increase costs or reduce cost, like changing light poles, for instance, as Jonathan was alluding to. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, but that's a lot of work. So
I wouldn't be looking for a line item, but you just brought out three big items: street, the street size, so street widths, which are really important in town So, just showing that, I'm not looking for, a book on this. I think maybe just identifying a few bullets in the major areas would give us a good idea of the positive aspects of how this impacts the town. Does that
So
make sense? Or
we
is that too much work?
No, I think it makes sense, Ralph, to the degree that there's a ton of stuff in here that didn't exist in our code, right? So there's some things we'll highlight as new. There's
Yeah.
some stuff that is better clarified as far as what the developers need to bring forward before we sign off. There's been some wishy-washy understanding of that in the past, and there's been discussions with them around, can I get my bond money back and so forth.
Mhm.
So, we've tightened up a lot of it. So I think if we're looking at new, um, revised or improved, and then, and then, where in, on the, sorry, and then the items that were just basically lifted from the prior code. I think we can do kind of a split like that fairly easily. And so then you can say, okay, this is new. Let me read it and see what it is. This is, revised versus the code. And so you can reference the code and see what that is if you think it's, um, you know, important enough in your review to spend time on it. And then, stuff that's just straight off copy. So, you see things like, runoff coefficients for use, dealing with hydrology and stuff like that. I mean, there's a ton of technical stuff here that gets clarified nicely and, puts the onus back on the developers to make sure that they're meeting the requirements of state codes for general groundwater runoff and stuff like that. So there's a ton of detail in here, and Gordon's right to do everything and then say, most of the cost in these goes to the developers, because they are being asked to do, either more or clarify what they're doing in their presentation of their drawings so that, we have something to measure against at the end. So a lot of that cost is not on the town, it's on the developers. I think the biggest implication for us is, I think it'll actually end up reducing our costs because these things are going to go in right.
Yeah, if you're talking about cost to the town,
Yeah.
none of this increased cost to the town. Arguably, everything here improves uh, um, sustainability for the town. Everything, and you could include that with the well. So the street, it's a hair wider. Okay, long term, we need to maintain 2 more feet of street. And what's the offset to that? A lot less friction with parking problems.
I can't imagine anyone, Gordon, not wanting wider streets. There are times when, right now, you can't even navigate around the vehicles that are there, the construction vehicles. So I don't think that's an issue. So I think what is important would be to show why we're making the big changes here and the big improvements to the code, and have some position on that going forward. And then if someone said, hey, why the heck are you doing this? You got a good defensible position on top of that. It's good reasons behind it. And I wasn't looking for a line by line, like if there's 2 or 3 major areas, particularly, road widths and things of that nature that really impact really everyone, not just the developers. Does that make sense
Okay,
again?
I'm happy to
I
provide
don't,
that
I'm not looking
analysis.
for, I hope, if that's too much of a burden, then explain to me a little bit more why that would be a burden.
I think I got it, and I appreciate the feedback.
And I appreciate what you did. So it's, thanks.
Okay, so I'm thinking you want to see that prior to adopting this, so I think we'll let it roll to next meeting and hopefully we can get you some content before mid-December. to allow you to better understand what we've done here.
And as always, I would invite council members to contact me individually with questions. If if they have a question leading up to an item that's on the agenda, please reach out and let's discuss it.
And to Jonathan's point, I'd say, if you can add the comments in layman's language, that would make it easy for everyone to read, so in terms of that, the benefits. Does that make sense? Or, just so that we get away from the very technical and we're showing why this is important for the town's, future.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, I can't thank Gordon enough for doing all this. This is long overdue. I was hoping to make this happen as part of the work we did with the last town engineer, but it didn't happen. So I'm really glad to see this move forward. This is a powerful piece of documentation. It's going to make everybody in the building approval process, and Thomas and Kathleen and all those folks, it's going to be much easier for them because it's clear and written, and everything's covered. At least we think everything we could think of is covered. So when they start whining, we can say, here it is, read it. That's what it says. So.
Yeah, it really is designed to, there's the old saying, good fences make good neighbors. Well, this sort of document is a fence. It's a point of understanding between us and the development community so that we can get along better going forward and have an understanding and avoid disputes.
Exactly. Okay. Let's move on to item 3. And you may say, well, wait a minute, we did that. And yes, we did. We did do this some months ago. However, in the process of it being approved by all of the constituencies within Wasatch that have chosen to use Heber Valley Animal Services for its animal control stuff, there were some I would say minor updates to the original agreement that some various communities asked for. And so as a result, the language in what I've been asked to sign doesn't match the language that we looked at when we approved it. So this is simply intended to make you aware of the changes, and I'm gonna let Polly and Cameron go through this. But yeah, let's understand it so we can see if there's any reason not to continue doing what we've been doing. Sorry, not too many. So Polly, you want to cover
Yeah,
this?
so it's pretty, so as the mayor just stated, we approved this back in April, and we voted to approve it. Since then, my understanding is that, there are certain entities which are involved in have been more involved, have more demands for the animal control. They're on the kind of controlling body, or would be. And so they now are just pushing forward this version, which corrected just a lot of naming of stuff, and the substantive stuff really didn't change. The key concepts are the same, that we will be charged based on the percentage of population of all the participating jurisdictions. So, whoever's participating, they would use our census data to figure out how much we would owe. And I think it's important, if we don't do this, we will not have animal control in the town. We won't have animal control services. So I would recommend supporting this and voting to approve it.
So again, it's pretty much exactly everything we said we expected. And as Polly says, some of the folks wanted some other stuff so we get, that we won't necessarily get, but they get because they're bigger or whatever. But um, we're such a small number, our cost, this isn't going to change our cost for the budget either. So I don't know I mean, we can go have them do it line by line if you want. I don't see the need to do.
I did a compare doc and it was actually quite messy because they changed so much of just the way the sentences were. They redefined participating jurisdiction. So it looked really like a lot of red lines, and really the substance was not any different.
Okay. Thanks, Polly. So questions for Polly on that? Or me?
The memo that came with that said that it would not increase, and I'm paraphrasing, the operating budget more than 15% a year. Does that mean the cost to the town might go up by 15% a year, or what does that mean exactly?
So they have a board that determines their operating cost. And yeah, that could mean, if they had 15% increases over a year, then that could increase our cost by, our proportional cost could go up by 15% a year. But just to be clear that that's the upper limit. Inflation, some years have gone over that. They have, costs related to equipment, costs related to salaries, that type of thing. So um, they're going, there's a group that is going to, the board is going to make the determinations related to the budget.
And please note that this is not an ongoing commitment. This is a year to year. We have the right to look at it from a budget perspective when they propose their numbers, and we can put that in our budget and review that when we do our annual budget review and decide if it's getting to be too much. Again, our share is so small that even if we got hit with a 15% one year, I don't know that would do a significant change to our budget. But so yeah, they're creating space for themselves, which is fine, because we can always say no.
Are they in a position of being the only folks that offer these services, or are there competitive services that might be cheaper?
There are not at the moment. It is a county, it's county managed. It's like the water, it's like, the fire district, et cetera. They are the provider for those services. They manage the legal stuff around it. They manage the collection of animals that are dangerous and have to be put down, all that. And again, I don't have the number in front of me, but from a budget perspective, it's a pretty small number.
Okay, thank you.
And there's to Jonathan's point, there's no private firms out there. So it sounds like either we do this or either we do it with them.
If we want animal control services, these are the provider.
Yeah. Okay.
And this is, yes, it is definitely, you're stuck, but we sit on we have a space on their committee. We get to make noise if we think they're out of control. I have been doing that. I will likely not be doing that in the future. But we can find someone who wants to participate and work as a representative from Hideout. But to date, I think in my inspection of their efforts and the work, they've been pretty darn frugal about it, and only do what is necessary. There's no, I've been to the shelter, et cetera. There's no glam there. It's basic. They take good care of the animals, but it's, you know, their farm or yard, whatever you want to call it, they also have an area for, because it's a no-kill shelter. So they also have an area for that. They work with the adoption agencies around for that as well. So there's partnerships with Friends of Animals and Nuzzles and so forth. So, I mean, they are partnered with the nonprofits that do that work, again, to keep their costs down. So I think that, I think it's a valuable service that we've already know the town needs. So, I'm recommending that we approve it. It again, not in any way significantly different than what we approved in April. So if the council has no more questions, then I would be looking for um uh a motion to approve an amendment with an ILA with Heber Valley Animal Services.
Yeah, I'll move. I think we have, they've done a I know they've actually been a good service to me at one time as well. So I don't know if we have any other choice really. So
Yeah,
and we do
exactly.
have it, and we do have an out we can look at this every year. So I would say let's continue our services. So
I'll second.
Thank you, Carol. All right, Chris, how do you vote?
A yes.
Thank you. Jonathan, how do you vote?
I'm a reluctant yes.
Okay. Carol, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Ralph?
yes.
Okay. Thank you. That passes, and we'll continue to work with them for the current fiscal year, and then we'll go from there. Item 4 is to authorize the new town treasurer, Jamie Heiner, to access the PTIF fund account. I'm going to need somebody to explain why we have to have the council to approve this, but
I- Well, I don't know if Jan wants to jump in, but my understanding is the state treasurer requires a resolution by the council in order to designate this. It's kind of part of the checks and balances.
okay.
So,
Well said.
So that's what's up. So this is Jamie's not the first of our treasurers to have access. She's just the current treasurer that um we're looking to put into place, have access to this. So um so that's what this is. It's pretty simply. So questions from council on, sorry, I lost my space here.
Do we require mayor to of this particular contractor or for service some kind of E&O coverage or
It's covered under the state with a bond. So the fact that she has the treasurer appointment, it's just also state bonded.
so does she secure the state bond?
No. It's provided with our insurance.
For our treasurer.
Correct.
Interesting. Okay.
As a reminder, the PTIF fund is where we've been placing I don't want to call them excess because they're not excess, but a portion of the funds that we have available to grow our interest at a higher rate than just leaving them in the bank. And so, you know, Katie, when she came in and Carrie, they brought awareness that we are not making the same return that we should be. So we've got funds in the PTIF that we manage, and we keep some in there because they're not due to be returned to people within a certain amount of time or whatnot. So yeah, this is a win for the town, and as I said before, each treasurer along the way has had access. So if there are no questions, it's simply um, uh, basically a motion to authorize the town treasurer to access the town's PTIF account, which I would be signing off on.
So moved.
Thank you, Jonathan.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ralph. Chris,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
and Jonathan.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That passes. Item 5 is not where I wanted it, but we can cover it now. There's a lot of stuff going on in the house um that makes it easier for developers to do what they want to do. In my opinion, it's not municipal friendly, but it is what they're passing or have passed. And so I'm going to let Polly's on. I'm not sure if other folks are on. I haven't looked at the list since I started talking. So, uh, but who else is on? But anyway,
Jay Springer is on.
Jay's all right. So we've got a couple
And
people on that can talk about this. And I'm going to let them do it because I'm still digesting it, to be honest.
yeah, and let me just introduce Jay to the council. So when the state over the last 2 years made significant changes to the subdivision law, and then they did provide for us funding to have certain vendors help make the changes to the law. And Jay Springer is an attorney with Smith Harvison, who's a great law firm, and so he has done the changes for Hideout and has been working with Thomas and Jan and myself, and also has been to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission has not forwarded a recommendation yet. They wanted to see it again, but because this is so much material, we thought it would be helpful for you to at least look at it and start thinking about it, because when it comes to you in December, we will have to comport with state code according to state law. So I will hand it over to Jay.
Guys, can you hear me okay?
We can, Jay. I don't know if you have anything you want to present. We can make that available to you too, if there's something wrong.
No, as Polly mentioned, this is a preview for you. Mayor, I don't believe you weren't at the first meeting I came to for the council to kind of outline that same very high level discussion that we've now been through with input from several stakeholders as you heard. And so this is just an opportunity to kind of see for you to hear and see where things are headed based on what we've gotten to so far. So excuse me, there are 3 titles that we've looked at or that we identified as needing potential changes. We'd originally noticed more, but upon further review, we realized we really only need to look at titles 3, 10, and 11. Title 3, we just make clarifications about the powers and authorities and the of the bodies, so that there's not a conflict when you're looking at a decision that, you know, we're now saying the planning commission has this authority and it says something different in Title III than it does in Title 11. So there's some consistency. That's why Title III is involved. And then 10 and 11, you know, we have some of those other changes.
Jay, would you
So
like me to share my screen and I can show the Word document that shows the changes? Would that be
sure.
helpful?
So I mean,
Or,
we do have that red line available if it would be helpful for the council at all.
or
And you know,
council?
it's
Yeah, sorry, or yeah, go ahead and give them the, I guess, council, I'd ask you if you want to see the red line while he's talking, or if you just want the high level discussion of it.
I'd like to see the graphic along with the audio.
Okay, let me
okay.
see. I have to admit, I'm not. Okay, so Jay, why don't you keep talking and I will figure out
Yeah.
how to share.
Yeah. Okay. So some of the high level changes that we're talking about, and I want to just talk about some of the direction that I've received and what we've tried to do in making the revisions that we have. One is we have tried to preserve as much as possible what you already have in the code, while, you know, taking feedback and any input from those parties. We also did we did review the engineering standards that Gordon was preparing to make sure that we
Excuse
have
me,
some.
could we widen the document so we can see what the language is on the right-hand side? I'm sorry to interrupt.
It's
Yeah.
okay. I should be more experienced with this. Does that help?
No, it's still coming
No,
up on the right margin. Oh,
there we
bingo.
go. Okay. So if you want to go through the document, we can do that, or I can continue it at the high level. I have a couple of other you know, just a couple of items that I reference that we don't have necessarily to share on the screen, but I think they've been circulated at least at the staff level. But you know, Hideout's lucky in the sense that you don't have to do this twice, at least not until next year. Several communities, larger ones, did have to go through and comply with the deadline of February 1st and then update after that. You know, because the 2024 legislature updated things. So we have, you know, there are some things that are strictly prohibited under the new code. We can no longer require pre-application meetings. If we do have them, meaning that if an applicant requests it or voluntarily goes into that process, then we can set rules and some regulations about how those proceed and what's required for them. We just can't require them to start it. Then the biggest change in 2024 was a clarification that the subdivision improvement plans, which are the engineering drawings, and those standards for utilities and any public improvements that are required for the subdivision, can only be reviewed during one stage of the application. So what we have done with Hideout, with input from both, I mean, we talked about this at the planning commission, and are, you know, making sure that this gets all the way throughout and that this is the direction the council wants to go, is requiring that those plans be part of the preliminary application and approval. So it's very front loaded, and, you know, in clarifying what that means that an application that comes to the planning commission for a subdivision will have everything it needs, and all final plat approval for is really just getting the documents ready to sign and record. And everything else is very much in that front loaded process at preliminary, which is, because we can only do it during one, the direction that we've taken this is to go at preliminary, which is very unusual, but I think that we've found that in found a way to do that makes sense.
Jay, I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So does that mean that at the preliminary stage that they would have to have plans that are ready for construction? In other words, final level plans?
Yes. Yes. So at that point, they can't when the planning commission approves it, if they grant preliminary approval, that's including approval of those subdivision improvement plans, because if you consider them during preliminary, you cannot modify them during final.
Oh, wow. So that's, I'm surprised that the development community wanted that.
Well, they don't. But what they said is you can only do it during one phase. Most communities go with final, but Hideout has elected to go with preliminary.
Okay, well, that's going to change my process a little bit. I guess there's no longer those what I've prepared and the process that's shown in those those engineering standards is a two-step process, a preliminary and a final. And so I guess I need to modify that and just have a final. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and I get right, because the state code doesn't allow us to have two steps. So no matter what, we would have to, that's a good catch, Gordon. No matter what, we would have to amend that because you're only allowed to have one process. You will have up to 40 business days to review it. And there are up to what they call, I can't remember what they call them, rounds or
Review cycles.
review cycles that you get. So if you can give comments and then they have to respond and answer them. And I mean, really, there's no reason that there would have to be four because they do have to answer all of your comments. But the idea is that you're not coming up, that we're trying to be as complete as possible, which we are anyway. What
Yeah,
this
it's the old multiple bites at the apple thing.
Right, so they want to avoid that, but state code allows for this. What that means is that it gives the planning commission the ability to make sure that the subdivision improvement plans comport with the preliminary plan and what the final plan would be, as opposed to, let's say a subdivision came in and then based on the improvement plan, that would cause changes to the preliminary plan. That would only be reviewed by staff if we waited. By front loading it, which we're allowed to do, then the planning commission will see that as well and be able to give their input on that subdivision plan. And although
Okay.
maybe a majority of towns are maybe doing it later, I know of several that are front loading it. So
All right. Well, so that's easy for me. I'll pull out the preliminary stuff, and when somebody submits, they're gonna submit plans that are ready for construction.
Yeah, and that I'm glad you were here, Gordon, as well, because one thing I really want to touch on so the council's aware is that the fail point that the legislature built in is that within those subdivision improvement plan reviews, if you don't include a comment to the developer on the application, then you have waived the ability to raise it later unless it's a life safety type issue. So if you send back comments on subdivision improvement plans that say, don't catch that they're off by 6 inches on some measurement or other, and it's not a life safety issue, you can't come back and say, well, no, you need to move this now. They have written into the Utah code that is prohibited and it's waived by the city. So taking those full 40 days, which as a smaller community, you have 40 business days. Larger ones above 5,000 population only have 20 business days. But we have written in nothing shorter than, I think, let's see. Yeah, so within 30 days, for those initial plans, excluding those, the part that we're looking at there, because it's all at preliminary, there are two clocks running at the same time. The goal is always to complete both sooner than the shorter of the time frames, but the town has to respond to the application in writing for everything except the subdivision improvement plans within 30 business days. That's state code. You have to also respond within 40 business days from receiving the subdivision improvement plans. And because we're requiring them at the same time, those timers start on the same day. If the engineer needs more time, or if the town needs more time for those plans, they can take the additional 10 days and just respond to the non-improvement plan portion of the application.
What
I
if you
think
find what if you find a problem in construction, a mistake in their plans that I, as the reviewer, didn't catch? Do we just have to eat that problem because we didn't
yes,
catch their mistake?
correct.
Well, and I
That's
guess
what
it
they
would
wrote in.
depend if they had an
Well,
error
yeah,
that was, I mean, if it's life safety, we can correct it. And also if it's an error because the plans are going to be stamped, right? Like they're not giving them, so you're just reviewing overall concept. But so if there's I guess you would go back to the engineer who drew them to say,
yeah,
there's this.
I like that, Polly, because that distinction is important. You're not signing off that their plans are up to, all of those things. You're signing off as they pertain to the code, the Hideout's code. And if there's something in Hideout's code that we didn't tell them they didn't comply with, but that wouldn't change our obligations to meet building code and other things, that might have other avenues that requirement exists in. Does that make sense?
That's not clear. That's not clear to me. So I'm going to have to work with Polly on understanding all that. So I'm sorry to derail the discussion.
You can also work with Jay. I mean, this is part of his job, is to help us understand the changes.
Sure. Okay. Both of you, because there's this flies in the face of, if I'm understanding correctly, it flies in the face of other parts of state code that say they can't hide the ball. So.
Yeah. There's certainly lots of problems with how this has come across. So we're doing our best, and I very much let's have that conversation and work through anything else. We are going to be going back to the planning commission, and we'll there are things we have to do, and we'll work within the parameters that we have.
Jay, just can I ask a real quick question, just clarifying question? So since we have front loaded with the preliminary submittal, many of the requirements, et cetera, for construction drawings, civils, et cetera, we have a concept plan submittal opportunity. And correct me if I'm wrong, we cannot require that, but by having so much front loaded for preliminary, they may be an applicant could be incentivized to go that route. Is that right?
Yes, as a practical matter, I think that's what's going to happen, because I don't see developers willing to eat that cost of doing full drawings before they have some feedback from the town at all.
So that option still remains. We cannot require it, but it is an option that we can offer them.
Right, and we strongly encourage it. That's the kind of thing that we've pushed for. The other thing I do want to emphasize that hasn't come up so far is we only have to follow these requirements for subdivisions, for single family, 2-family, and townhomes. If you get into anything that is multifamily, commercial, anything above that, anything like that, it does not have to apply. It's a practical matter. Most communities use the same process because they don't want their staff to have to know two different procedures. But what I've also seen is uh, the town will not apply the timelines to subdivisions that don't have to have that, but they'll do those. So I don't know if that changes. Again, I'm very sensitive to, I think that the failure points in this process is by introducing too many different procedures, more than you have to, and then if you only get one type of subdivision, one you get 10 of one type and one of another, and you follow the rules for the 10 when you get the other, and then you make a mistake. I think that's where you can get into hot water. So I do have, I do talk about this all day long every day. So what is important to the town and the council at this point?
Jay, I got a follow-up question on,
Yeah.
so you hit on the topic that I wanted to at least address, and that is the applicability. So it's single family, two family, and townhomes. So no matter how many units that you're talking about, but they have to be one of those three types to qualify for the SB 174. Is that the way I'm reading it, correct or incorrect?
Yes.
So
Yes.
if we have, so two things then as follow-up to that. If we have mixed use, meaning it's got some commercial and it's got some of these three components, it would fall under commercial as an example, or mixed use, or it would not qualify in the SB 174. Is that correct?
Yes, that is my understanding and recommendation to all of my clients. So if there are components that are not required to follow this, then the entire application falls outside of it.
Yeah,
And
so
it's a little open-ended. I don't know that the legislature will keep it that way. It falls on an interpretation of the word for. These are subdivisions for single family, two family, and townhomes. And I've certainly seen litigation over a single word before.
and sorry, is it a subdivision of one or more, or is it is there a lower bound to that, or
A subdivision is as defined as one that is creating a new lot.
okay, fair
And
enough.
so, yeah.
That's what just one more follow as well. If the area is say zoned, in our case, mountain residential or mountain, which is a certain size lot for a certain size home, and they want multifamily, that would not qualify under this?
No. And another thing on that point I want to emphasize is this only deals with the subdivision procedures. So as we've talked with Gordon and we've talked about zoning, none of those requirements are modified here. And also, to the extent that this removes the council from being able to be part of an approval procedure of an individual subdivision application, it does not remove any of the council's ability to set the standards or to zone property. So, one of the common things that you'll see, in different communities and likely here is you'll see attempts to, you'll see a developer come in and say, well, we want to do this, but we want something different than your code. Now you're in negotiation territory, you're in development agreement territory, and you are not going to be beholden to that until after you've worked out all those things. So it's not a requirement to allow certain things anywhere within your community. It's just how they get it once they're entitled. So that is one of the other things with this is the idea is that an applicant, everything needs to be available. So an applicant could, in theory, if they read the code properly and did everything they were supposed to, bring an application that was fully compliant on day one. You know,
And
so
thanks for clarifying all that, because that's the way I kind of read it but wasn't really sure. All the red lines you have in here so far would bring us into compliance with SB 174. Is that the way you were composing this? You and I don't know if it was
yes, and
you
this also incorporates several of the changes that we talked about at the Planning Commission. So the direction from the Planning Commission was we want to go this direction with front loading, but we want to see how it looks. So bring it back along with any other clarification, and then we did want to bring it to you so that you know the direction that things are going. And if there are any questions or concerns that you want to see between now, the Planning Commission, and when it comes back to you with the recommendation, we can work that into this process.
And does this have any impact on master development agreements in the future? Is there any intersection between the two?
So, Polly, if you'll go back to that very last page, the very last section of the very last page, we do say that 11.08.010, you were right there. It's the very bottom. A little bit further. There you go. So what we did do that affects development agreements, one, it won't be retroactive to anything that's already been signed and committed to. But what we have done is that required, just really clarified, because this is already in the code. If they can't comply as is, then they're not entitled to approval. This is saying if you want to say, well, we're going to have our 2 access points because we're going to have 50 units and you need to have you can't just have 1 access point. But we're going to do that in a future phase, or we're going to do open space in a future phase. We're going to say, well, then you need to come and negotiate that up front. That was included in the vesting statute, if you're familiar with that in the Utah Code, where in HB 476, which was 2024, the legislature introduced a requirement that the municipality must consider an application by itself unless there's a phasing plan in a signed development agreement. So even if you know that the developer owns the adjacent lot and is planning to develop it, if it's not part of a phasing plan in a development agreement, the city cannot, by state law, consider that other development in their approval procedures. So we wrote in something to clarify that if you're planning on that, and if anything in your plan requires a future development, you've got to do a development agreement.
Okay, and in that sense, all phases would have to be considered in the development agreement. Is that the way I'm interpreting that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that would be, Polly wouldn't let a development agreement come through that didn't address that full thing. So.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you,
let me
Jen.
also say it's a little confusing because we use development agreements a lot in the town. We can't require them if it's just a straightforward, if someone's meeting everything in the code, we can't require development agreements. But when someone wants to do, let's say, a rezone or some kind of master planned type project, then a development agreement is allowable. And can
And
be.
would multi-phasing, because we do a lot of that, Polly, would that be inclusive of what you were just saying? So if
Well,
we
I'm
did
reading here, Jay.
if we did phasing, would we automatically, not automatically, but that would bring in consideration of a master development agreement potentially?
Yeah, and I don't mean to I don't want to step on Polly's toes, but yes, there's lots of reasons why a developer would want that if they're doing phasing, even if they're doing phasing that technically could comply. But if they want to preserve the zoning and everything that they have right now and get vested for the future phases, that's another reason they would want to come in so that they can plan for the future phases so that they're the same as what their first phase is, because the city could go and change the code between now and when they bring the next subdivision application in. So there's lots of reasons, and that would be another reason. But Paulie's right on that there are requirements in the state code and limitations on what development agreements can be used for. And one of them is you can't require it if they're entitled to build what they want to build as is.
Got you. Okay, that makes sense.
So
Yeah,
I have a
thanks.
question, a thought, and a request. The question is, am I correct that the council sets the standards and the requirements, but essentially the planning commission will now be in charge of, for lack of a better word, enforcing or making sure that all those requirements are met?
Yes, that's how we've structured this, is that it'll be the planning commission will be the administrative land use authority. So if you think of it as the council writes the Scantron and the planning commission fills it in.
Okay, so then I have a thought.
Or
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead and finish. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, please go ahead.
So my thought then is that we probably, as a council, need to revisit our standards and reviews and requirements for these various projects and get them, make sure that they're up to date and make sure that they cover everything. Does that seem like a logical thing to do?
Yeah, and that's what a lot of communities are doing. I can think of a handful that have gone immediately after passing this or a similar requirement or code and revisited their zoning and just, redid that because, like I said, it doesn't affect any of your zoning authority. And some councils have really taken it upon themselves to say, well, let's limit the zoning so far that everybody, this would be an extreme example, that basically everybody who wants to build anything has to come and ask for a rezone.
Okay.
So, but yes, you at any time, one of the things in the standards and those, it is written into the code that those are approved by resolution of the council. So, I mean, it is very clear that your role as the policy setters remains.
Okay, so I really think that we need to, to revisit and review all those requirements to make sure that A, they're up to date, and B, they really reflect all the things that we think ought to be there. And then lastly, I'm wondering whether or not it would be a good idea to have, various members of the town kind of run through a mock process, before we actually get one under the new rules, such that everybody understand who does what they can and cannot do.
I
Yeah,
think,
that's
right,
go ahead, Polly.
sorry, I mean, I think that part of the process of what Jay has done is to make sure that our subdivision process meets state code, especially, what the updates. In terms of what I'm hearing him say is, yes, the council can set standards in terms of zoning and requirements that way. But if someone meets the requirements, then it's pretty much they are, they're entitled to a subdivision plat. Right? So yes, we need to be careful, but I don't think that, I mean, it's been pretty administrative up until now. So Jay, I'd be curious, based on your experience, we're not going to change our zone. Well, I guess we could, but I don't think that we would want to change our zoning such that everything has to come in for a rezone. I
Right.
think that would be pretty intensive. But otherwise, I mean, did you see anything in our subdivision code that you thought needed to be reallocated?
Well,
Uh,
I haven't done a deep enough dive to really know. I'm still kind of,
I'm talking to Jay,
oh, my mistake. I'm sorry.
because
um,
Jay sees a lot of communities, so.
yeah, so no. Really the biggest thing is we have looked at the checklists, or the application forms. We'll need to make those consistent, but the types of things that are required, um, outside of the engineering and those specifications, which I'm not qualified to comment on in any depth, um, are consistent. We have bonds, we have completion assurances, we have the types of studies. What I have seen communities so far outside of the zoning space reconsider is, whether they have the types of studies that are appropriate. So I just had a community um, add a geotech and traffic for a part of their town. You know, if it falls under this area, then you also have to do these studies, which aren't required universally. But now that we're looking at it, we're going to add those to certain areas. Um, and just looking at the requirements, we also looked some of the other things that we've considered here. We looked at the fire district review because that is not a town agency, and we put that on the applicant to get the approval so that their clock is running, not the town's, if they're having difficulties with those any third parties. Um, and other than that, I think we certainly can look at and add any other items that might be missing. But in terms of, a lot of things in terms of what has to be on a plat for it to be recorded, have been adequately covered in state code and in Gordon's plans, and all of those kinds of things. That's where the meat of it really is. What we're dealing with the state code is the process. So we've looked at things and made changes to protect the town as much as possible. So,
Jonathan, I think one of the things you may have been getting at is maybe development standards, sensitive lands overlay, et cetera. And I think those live in Title 10, which is outside of the subdivision code. Those still remain intact and in effect, but it may warrant that we go back and look at them and just make sure that, after we implemented those in 2020, are we still comfortable with those? Do we need to tweak those? But those are still applicable as an overlay over the subdivision process. Those remain.
Yeah, I guess I'm just merely suggesting that we take another look at those kind of things and make sure that we're good with them, because otherwise, as I understand it, that is no longer going to be something we can enforce.
Well, I think, Jonathan, what this is telling us is that on the major subdivisions coming through the planning commission, we may need to decide if one or two council members would like to be uh, attending planning commission so that we can start to think about that stuff before, because it may not come to council. So,
Won't come to council.
so it won't come to council. So therefore, we want to make sure that we're closely aligned with the planning commission, maybe more closely than we have been. Right now, Thomas has been the connector, but we may, and I know some council members attend some of the planning commissions, but maybe that we want to decide to say, okay, two of the council members will also, regularly join planning commission.
Yeah, I think as long as that's allowable, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, it's totally allowable. I mean,
Okay.
can't go beyond two, but I think we could do two. So, but anyway,
yeah, and I have seen communities add, that didn't previously. I think you already do have a planning commission report to your council as part of your regular agenda. I've
right.
seen that added to communities. I've seen certainly more involvement from the council level, so there are things to do that. another thing that we did talk about with the planning commission is, even though if you have a public hearing and they have checked all the boxes and are entitled to approval, 100 people can show up and they still have to approve it. But one of the reasons that's kind of good, I'll say it's as positive as you're going to get in this context for the council, is if they are entitled to approval and it comes to the council and you have public outcry and then you have to approve it because they're entitled, uh, that puts you as elected officials in a bad spot that you can no longer be in. But that said, having the public hearing at the planning commission is the opportunity for you to learn what is and isn't working and how keep your finger on the pulse of the community, because other than that, you're depending on direct outreach from the community to you. Even if you can't do anything right then, you're going to know about it for the next time, and possibly be able to do something on the policy side.
So yeah, I mean, we have work to do because of the implications of this, whether we do a development review committee. I don't know. We got to figure something out so that that we're make sure that our alignment with what's going on with planning commission is good, and they understand our bigger vision pictures, that we don't often necessarily share everything that around that, but we're gonna have to do a better job communicating there. There's no doubt. Because we don't get a second chance. So we gotta get it right up front.
Yeah.
Jay, does any of this impact variances?
No.
Board
No.
of Adjustment approaches, so no impact there, right?
Well, no, not for variances. We did update the appeals procedure for appeals specifically from the subdivision improvement plan. So those drawings, state code does prescribe a new process where the applicant provides an engineer, the town provides an engineer, those two engineers pick a third, but that is only on appeals from those standards. So that is, saying if you if the town engineer and their engineer can't come to an agreement and they say we have complied, and we say no, you have not, and it gets to the point where you are at a complete impasse, then you go to this section that Polly just pulled up. And that is a procedure that already existed. It didn't exist for this. It existed for geotechnical appeals and concerns, and they applied it to this, which it is added cost for all sides, but it does give a little bit more power to the engineer from the developer side.
Thanks.
I'll entertain any more questions. I don't know what else would be helpful.
So I guess we can say this is coming back to the planning commission in a couple of weeks, next week. I'm not sure when it's coming. Sorry?
Next week.
Next week.
Yeah.
So that's certainly a good place to check in. When, to get an update and hear what they're hearing and hear what they're thinking. Certainly welcome a couple of you to get excited enough about this to find another few hours in your schedule to listen in next week at the planning commission. To get your heads around this a bit more. It is confusing. It is certainly, as I said, intended to be developer friendly in some respects. As Gordon says, no two bites out of the same apple. So it just, we got to start, as Jonathan mentioned, we got to review our practices and make sure we're getting in front of this so that when they come forward after having been through the planning commission, our council viewpoints are reflected.
Yeah. I appreciate the time. I've made note of the recommendations, and I'll convey that along with with the others here on the meeting that'll be at the Planning Commission. Really appreciate the time. One last thing I did want to report on is I did a check-in on our budget. So as this is paid for, my time is paid for by the state, by the Department of Workforce Services. They are not my client, you are. So I'm doing this with everything in mind for Hideout. We are just barely past the halfway time on the budget, which has gotten us through the two council meetings now. The initial drafting, which was the bulk of it, getting familiar with your code and getting something presentable to the Planning Commission and now to you, and then we'll go back to the Planning Commission and then come back to you. So we're in really good shape to do all the work that's required now. We'll be looking for an action in October, in December next month, and the reason for that is if you don't adopt it, then you are basically stuck with the base level unmodified state code that does not favor you. So even if it's not perfect and we need to do things, we're going to do our best. But I mean, obviously, you're a very involved council, and that's great. So there's going to be, I imagine you'll be revisiting this, or the standards, or the zoning, or something related to it in 2025. So, but that's kind of where we're at, and it's been great to work with everybody. So, look forward to the next couple of meetings.
Okay, thanks, Jay, very much for all the time you spent with us, and the knowledge you brought about how the implications of this code, so that we can, try and retain some degree of control. The whole purpose of having a municipality is land use, in the state of Utah, and they seem to be working hard to take that away. But
yeah,
but we'll keep gnawing away at it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So there's more to come, council, as you know, so, and coming quickly. Item 6, let's move on to the next one, is consideration of authorizing the mayor to enter into a professional service agreement with Latham Excavation and Services LLC. So what that is we did a RFP for proposals for a company that could help us with water, sewer, and storm drain events, as far as maintenance, cammering, flushing, and urgent repairs. So we have historically had luck using JSSD for a lot of this. I've tried to work into an agreement with them for multiple years. They've finally said they're not going to do it. Go find somebody else. They'll still be there in case of an emergency from time to time, but if we want to have the degree of maintenance and stuff that has to happen with our infrastructure, we had to have somebody to do that. So Latham came in as the best candidate in the last last RFP. There was a committee that reviewed it. Gordon, myself, there was somebody else, Dan was all on that. And we all came to the conclusion that these were the preferred guys. They had the most complete capabilities that we needed, and they had the best cost for those capabilities. There's a budget amount in our budget for this. It's around $100,000 in our budget. It is this is no different really than the service agreement we have with planning, with legal, with engineering. So it basically says, we have the right to, you give the mayor and the staff the right to engage with these guys to do this kind of work up to the budget amount. And we've already been very clear on that in our other discussions, that that if for any reason these services, be they any of them, including Polly and Gordon and so forth, exceed what we've budgeted, or look to be exceeding what we budgeted, then we would come back to council for blessing for any additional funds, barring some sort of emergency event. So, if we have a water leak and it's flooding all over the roads, we're going to call these guys first, and then, we'll figure out the cost later because we got to stop the water leak. But other than that, it's all budgeted and thought through, planned and maintenance. So that's all. This is just another service provider that we're adding to the list. There's no new, it's just another contract scope agreement with these guys on what they do and what they don't do, just like we have it with HAL, just like we have it with Poly, et cetera. And so that's where we are. Poly has reviewed this. Gordon has reviewed this multiple times. Dan has reviewed this. So we're happy with the language that's in the agreement reflecting our needs. And so more, it's just, again, this is just a line item to say, okay, this is the new water sewer guy that we're going to use, and you're aware of it and okay with us using them for this kind of work. I don't know, Polly, did I pretty much say that right?
Yep, absolute. That was spot on.
So again, this is not like all of our, I shouldn't say all, like many of our agreements for these kinds of services. It's just another, on-demand type service. We're going to have a certain amount of routine maintenance that's planned in our budget. So these guys are going to do a certain amount of flushing and so forth, in the sewer system. They're going to do a certain amount of stuff with the water system per our maintenance planning. But there's also funds in there, estimated in case of events. Ideally, we won't use them, and we'll come up short because we didn't have a bunch of leaks or, something bad happen. So that's what that means. Questions?
I guess I have a question. As I look at this, there's a flat rate for labor and then plus cost of parts, materials, and things like that. How are parts and materials priced? Do we get the wholesale price? Do we get the Home Depot price? Do we get the 300% above retail price? How does that work?
I don't know, is Gordon still on?
Yeah, it's in the contract, and this was so when we put this out for proposal, it was a value-based selection, and which meant that cost was a factor in the selection process. It wasn't the sole factor, but it was a factor. It was a significant factor. And one of the items that they had to bid on, so to speak, was their markup. And so that's what you're referring to, Councilmember Gunn, that is that markup, and that's in the contract, and it's 25%. So it's going to be cost plus 25% on parts.
So their acquisition cost plus 25%?
Yes.
Okay. And I guess I have a suggestion. I did not see a not to exceed price in here. And I think under section 1.16.037, every contract's got to have that.
We've been through this multiple times on this, and I don't know what we did with our language on this, but these are on-demand services not to exceed our budget. And so that's what we've been doing. As I said, with all the other ones, we have a budget number that doesn't go in the contract, but we have checks and balances in our process that keeps that in front of us so that we don't exceed the budget. So I don't know, Polly, how you want to address that, because we've got 5 other contracts that have the same approach.
Well, I can speak to this briefly, and then yeah, let me speak to it briefly. So the problem with a procurement like this is the scope of work is undefined. we don't know we don't know the magnitude and the scope of what might go wrong for us to need these services. And so all we can do is get some unit prices. And so those prices are fixed. We have a cost schedule for the things that we could imagine, and then we have some hourly rates that are fixed. And candidly, that is the best you can do when you don't know the scope of the project. This is a services agreement. It's not a project agreement.
Well, I would suggest that we recently edited the code, and the code says every contract has to have a not to exceed price. And I would suggest that the not to exceed price is whatever it is we have in the budget.
Yeah, I was just gonna jump in. I was just double checking that we do have that not to exceed amount in our code. So we will add in a line that says that the not to exceed price is what the total budget is allocated for this.
Terrific. Thank you.
So we're going to do this on an annual basis and rewrite the agreements on an annual basis?
We can clarify that it's annually.
Okay.
And then we can put in a disclaimer saying that that amount could change annually or something along those lines.
Okay. Very good. So we'll need to can we look to
I would
authorize?
ask, yeah, so I would ask that the motion be to authorize the mayor to enter into this agreement with the addition of the not to exceed amount being related to the budget.
I had a question before we got into that, so one more question. Is there any kind of retainer or minimum that it's an on-demand service? I just want to make sure that's the case here. We're not paying them any retainer, are we?
That's a Gordon question, I think.
No, if we don't call them, there's no charge.
We don't call them throughout the year. It's a zero bill, right?
Correct.
However, the intention is to call them for, the planned maintenance activities. So I doubt very much that we'll have a zero.
Okay, just wanted to know if and then on top of that, we're not providing any retainer for anything.
No,
It's just based upon time and materials.
yeah, I mean, it's what the agreement says, we want you to do, 5 miles of sewer line this year in such and such an area. As part of our, as we work through all the sewer line flushing for the entire town, and we do that, the major lines get flushed at a certain frequency, the minor lines get flushed at a less frequency, it's that kind of thing. So we've got a whole, engineering plan for how to maintain our infrastructure. And so certain valves get turned at certain frequencies, certain sewer lines get checked at certain frequencies, et cetera. So those go every year, if we're keeping up with our maintenance plan. So I would not expect this agreement to lead to zero spend.
Fair enough. Thanks.
Any other questions?
I would add that this agreement has two aspects to it. It's got maintenance aspect and then emergency aspect. So we've got prices for both scenarios.
Right. Yeah, and they're different because, obviously emergency requires quicker response versus planned stuff. So, but another good news about these guys is they're relatively local, which, helped us in our consideration. They don't have to come from, Ogden or someplace to come help us. They're all, I think it was Heber based. Am I right, Gordon? I think they're Heber based.
No, Camas.
Oh, canvas-based, even better. So they're really close. So that's great.
And
Okay.
just a point of interest, as the committee evaluated these proposals, we came to our conclusions independent of each other. So this was a unanimous decision from an independent review of each.
Yeah. Thanks, Gordon. Yeah, so we each looked at the proposals, ranked them 1, 2, 3, and then got together and all our ones were the same. So it made it a fairly short discussion. Okay, so we're back to a motion to authorize the mayor to enter in a professional service agreement with Latham Excavation, with the addition of a not to exceed clause in the contract to be aligned with our 23, 24 budget.
So moved.
Or 24, 25, I guess. We're in 24, 25, aren't we? Yeah. Be 24,
So
25.
moved.
Sorry.
I'll second.
Thank you. Jonathan move, second Carol. Okay, Ralph,
Yes.
thank you. Chris,
Yes.
thank you. Um, Carol
Yes.
and Jonathan,
Yes.
thank you. All right, that finishes up the primary elements in the budget. We've now got committee updates and council minutes to look at. So I don't know if there's anyone on from the Planning Commission tonight. We certainly had a lot of talk about Planning Commission. We know what they're working on, that's for sure.
Tony's on.
Okay. Then you said
Then it
Tony,
starts, Tony.
you said Tony was on?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
is.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you for finally getting to me. To give the council a brief update of what's upcoming is first item on next week's agenda is the zoning issues with Jay to see what happened with the recommendations and questions we had last month and with some issues that we've discussed that might arise and how that would be handled. I anticipate us making a recommendation on that, seeing that we are under time constraints to get it to you before the beginning of the year, a new year. Second item is Tim Schoen's project. I believe they have resolved their height issue, but the plan he's coming forward with does not meet the town code in regard to retaining walls. He has one, I believe, that's somewhere between 12 and 16 feet, which does not conform to our current code. That has to be looked at and discussed. The other issue that will finally be on is Rocky Mountain Power in regard to the replacement of all their utility poles. This is the first time on, so I don't know where that's going to go, how far it's going to go, or make it to you for December. Next is Mr. Brockbank coming back for the fourth time, basically starting over, because now he's added the other 44 acres that he's purchased to the project. So it's basically back to square one with that. And GCD has once again asked for a continuance to the month of December in regard to the issues with the plat that they would like to start on and reconfigure.
Okay.
Does any council members have any questions in regards to any of that?
You got a lot on your plate, Tony.
Yes, and I'm sure it's only gonna get worse with this new new law that the state has deemed in the best interests of everyone to enact.
Yep.
Tony, did you say that that Tim Schoen is going to come back with a revised plan? Is that what I heard to begin with?
There was the last proposal. There was issues with the height.
I remember, and
because
the retaining and the height of the retaining wall.
No, it was just the height last time. Now the retaining wall is a new issue that has arisen with his new proposal, with what he's coming back with. It was not an issue last time.
Okay. Not changing the design of the layout, though. Is that correct?
Well, he has to lower the structure to conform. I don't know what else might have changed to upon lowering the building. I have not yet seen it. I've just discussed it with Tom.
The building footprint may expand a little bit because of it being a reduced height to try to make up some square footage. But Tony's right. There's some. It's a bit different in terms of how the retaining walls are configured and the heights. So it's a different submittal.
Okay.
Thanks, Tom. And Tony.
Are there any other questions? Anything else?
I hear not, Tony, so you're free to go.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Um,
and your team.
Yes. And Mr. If I can, I believe we're going to have to come and figure out how you want to go forward under these new regulations. So we're all, for lack of a better term, kind of in lockstep with the best interest of the town.
Yep. I think we're going to have to figure that out, Tony. We'll certainly take your thoughts and recommendations to make sure that, we don't want to be second guessing you, especially in a public forum, you and the team. So we need to figure out how we get connected enough that we're not working at odds at each other, because we're trying to extract one thing, and you guys are focusing on the actual physical structures. So we just got to be together. So that, I don't know how we're going to do that. I'll have to do some thinking about that. I'll take your input as well as the rest of the councils. And let's think about how we want to do this in a way that, and I don't want to give you double work either. So we got to figure it out.
Well, I mean, with all due respect, I don't know how much more work it'll be, because on the back end, the workload is greatly reduced.
True.
There's not going to be meetings over the same issue.
True. Yeah, they're not going to come back 5 times.
Nope.
So that'll clean it up too. So you could be right. Hope for the best.
No, but I will say this: we have a lot of questions for Jay in regards to what can or can't be done, and especially in regard with some things that have been before us and will continue to be in front of us. And
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, if they started already, does that mean they fall under the old rules or what?
Right. And, in regard to, if you want to change an existing plat that's already been platted and approved, now you want to come back with something else and change it. That's the biggest concern that we have right now that has arisen since the last meeting with Jay.
Okay. So that's obviously one of your questions for next week.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks. Okay. Community engagement, Valerie.
Good evening, everybody. Okay, so for the month of December, the committee is partnering with CCPC for a food drive. This will help replenish their shelves through the holidays. We will have drop-off at Town Hall and throughout the community and various developments. We also have plans for the community events for spring and summer. That's all
Okay.
I got. Any questions?
When will we start the PC?
The food drive starts December 1st.
Okay.
CCPC will come and drop everything off and pick up all the food donations from town hall as well.
Okay, perfect. So I think we just need to do a good job getting that message out to the community through our email stuff, through our apps, et cetera, so everybody knows that it's going on.
Correct. And I've already made Carol aware of it, as well as Jan and Ms. Fairborn as well. And I will work on a flyer that we can print out and put on mailboxes as well.
Super. Thank you. Questions for Valerie? Okay. Ralph, EDC?
Yeah, I mentioned before, the big thing, the big item we've had in the past month was yesterday
Yeah.
at Town Hall, where we had we had a very good turnout, according to what I've heard from other places and from other people. It was pretty much full. Participation from all the EDC members. Uh, Tony wasn't there. I think he was out of town, but Jonathan, JD Cronin, Tim Dora was out of town, Jan, Alicia, Carol was there. So did I miss anyone? But I think we all took turns in trying to help people understand what was the set of poster boards, and they kind of created a storyboard around what we were asking input on, and then everyone had that chance to put their one or two stamps up there, which were just little red post-its. We haven't tallied anything yet. Jan, anything you want to add between last night and today? I'm not sure if you've had a chance to kind of like do any math on what we've come up with, but that's the next step. And then also to put this into context of what we're seeing as what we saw last night, but also to put out a survey to get some additional input. And hopefully all of this will happen soon. Otherwise, we'll lose the time element and value of what we just created. So things should move fast, but want to make sure Jan can add anything here from any action you've done today to capture any of the information that we captured last night.
We had 4 comments, follow-up comments, and they were all congratulatory. They were well done. They were, thank you for this. We want more. So we intend to keep this going forward. Already, Alicia has started with the survey, and we're putting together a summary for the website. I think it's a fabulous new concept for Hideout and a new face of Hideout. We had a lot of media coverage consistent with our communications plan, and I think it was a fabulous win for the community.
Yeah, I saw what's her name, Carla from Park City. She already produced an article, as well as ABC News, for in Salt Lake, Jordan already released a video. So yeah, some positive stuff. Hopefully that will create some positive vibes for our neighbors as well, because that was part of the effort, I think, that we tried to portray for the town as well.
Do we have a count on the final number of attendees?
I didn't add them up. I'll let you know.
Okay. I had a mental number in my head of somewhere around 45, but that's just a rough guess.
Closer to 60, actually.
Oh.
I would go more than 60.
Yeah. And not everybody, I don't think everybody signed in, but I scanned the sign-in sheets earlier today. It was around the high 50s and not everybody signed in. So I'd say north of 60.
And are we counting dogs as well, John? No, his Alaska Mountain. Yeah, that took up a good chunk of space. No, all good, Phil. I think it was well done, and just compliments to everyone who attended from town, and our, all the team. Alicia was there as well. I missed you, Alicia. So thank you for all your efforts.
I think it's great, guys, that we're getting that, and we're going to get some vision of what we want to do down there. And now we got to, with some input, we'll confirm that up and hopefully start finding partners to go make it a reality. So, okay. Thomas, anything from the DRC perspective?
No, everything that is under construction has obviously been reviewed. Probably on our plate in the near future will be potentially Elkhorn Springs, depending how that plays out, and maybe the Showman property. But other than that, everything's underway.
Thank you. Questions for Thomas? Okay. Chris, post.
Yep. Hi, the post committee had a meeting last week. It was it was at town hall, and it was to talk about grant opportunities, Nancy O'Toole from MAG, and winter grooming potential at Ross Creek, including a discussion of the type of grooming equipment to possibly purchase with Amanda White, the park manager. So we had members of the post committee there, and also JD from the Economic Development Committee. I really want to thank John Hopkins and Kathleen Hopkins for taking the time to mark the single track in Ross Creek, just in case it's possible to groom it this year, because once there's deep snow, you can't find the trail if you haven't pre-marked it. So they put in a lot of effort for that, and we thank them. We're also expecting a draft wildlife collision mitigation study and plan sometime in November or December, and that's coming from a joint effort between UDOT, BioWest, and the DNR. They had come out to Hideout in early October for a wildlife vehicle collision mitigation site visit, and they went with also Kathleen, Carol, and members of their committee around looking at various locations in town and talking about the wildlife fencing, etc. I was not able to be there, but Carol, is there anything from that site visit you'd want to add that we haven't already talked about?
No, I do think that Kathleen sent it out to everybody. There was a final report from that meeting. Gosh, I mean, I received it, and I thought it was sent to, maybe it was just sent to post members.
Well, I did not get the final report. If you got one from BioWest, I don't think I got that. So let's definitely talk and look at what that report looks like.
Right, and you may want to check with Kathleen, because I believe Kathleen got it first and then she sent it out. So
okay,
but I will
so
talk to you.
And that's it for the post committee.
Thanks.
Any
Thanks,
questions?
Chris. If that report, if you think it's worth
sorry,
the entire council seeing it, that would be great.
Okay.
I thought there would be a chance for public input on it. I did not. I thought that there was going to be that kind of opportunity. We need to get more clarity. I'll talk to Kathleen and see what she knows.
Hey, Chris, and there was a person last night who came from who I talked to, wasatchwildlife.org, Jody Giddings. She's CEO of, and she was talking about certainly, protecting wildlife. That's what that organization does. Maybe you know her already, but she attended last night. We spent a few minutes conversing. So also Amanda White was there as well. I talked to her for a few minutes as well, but Jody I've never met before. So is that someone, I have her card here, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, we'll
I
take
have her
it for the post committee.
We'll
We've
link her
not
in.
met her. Yeah,
Sorry,
Jan,
could
do you
only,
know? Bill,
sorry, just one person speak at a time. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
Ralph offered her contact information, so I think, Jan, we should collect that.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'll pass this on to you guys and see if you can have if it's worthwhile to follow up and see what she has to offer, so to speak, and that what their org has to offer.
Right. A study is one thing, but then spending the money to do the mitigation is something else. Ralph, this is just going to, I think, tell us what we probably already know because we live here. We see the roadkill. Some of us have it here. We know that it's a significant problem, and that good to have it's good to have the data, which I think they're going to provide in a formalized report, and so be able to figure out strategies to see what we could do to mitigate it and how we might be able to seek and attain funding for it.
I've reached out to her, invited her to our next post meeting.
Okay.
Thanks, Jan.
Okay. Anything else for Chris? Okay, Carol, transportation updates. I know the winter season's coming, so some interesting opportunities with the new bus lines.
Right. And the new bus lines don't have the new schedule yet. I talked to the people at Park City Transit last week and then again today. They still haven't finalized the schedule. They said the new transit schedule will be in effect beginning December 8th. And it was unavailable today. They said probably a week from now they should have it ready. So my thought was that as soon as I do find out what the new schedule is from Richardson Flat, I can send it over to Carol Custerly and maybe she could do a blast email to everybody so they're aware of it. Is that possible to do?
Absolutely. Should be done. We want to get it out there to the entire community best we can.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because truly more and more people are using the Park City Transit services from Richardson Flat. So
Yep.
I will keep following up. I'm also on a new app, which is from Park City itself. And so they said they would notify me. And then just as an aside, I was in contact with someone who has an app. It's called the Park City app, and he provides transportation down to Salt Lake and various places around town. And so I can get that information to Carol as well. I'm not exactly sure what his costs are. It will not be a free service. You would pay for it, but he is trying to organize a number of transportation companies and put them all together so that people can find out who they are, what their rates are on his app. So I'll get that information as well. The app is still in the process of being completed.
Okay. Thank you, Carol.
Okay.
Very exciting. And it's cold enough to make snow, so in fact, some of the mountains are open. So
Right.
all you skiers get ready. It's ski time. Okay, let's move on to approval of council minutes. We've got two sessions, which is the October 10th meeting and the November 2nd special town council meeting. One will be much quicker than the other. But let's take a look at October 10th and see if I can make it a little bigger. But this is when Carol was away. So, but Anybody have comments on the minutes? Okay, so if I'm not hearing any comments, then we would need a motion to approve the minutes of October, sorry, October 10th, 2024.
And I'd like to request that I abstain from it since I was not at the meeting.
Right.
Also move.
Thank you, Ralph. Anyone who want to second the minutes for October 10th? I mean, sorry, October 14th. No, October 10th. Sorry. Duh.
I will.
Thank
I'll
you.
second.
Thanks, Jonathan. Okay. Chris,
Yes.
thank you. Carol's gonna hold off on that. So Jonathan
Yes.
and Ralph.
Yes.
Okay, still enough of a quorum to approve the minutes. So October 10th is approved. Thank you, Alicia. But this was a closed session, so there's really pretty simple. Um, this is what we publish as far as the closed session. So I didn't see anything wrong with it. She got all the right people and the time's right. So I would need a motion to approve the November 2nd special council meeting.
I'll move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Ralph. And then Jonathan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
thank you. Ralph
Yes.
and Carol.
Yes.
Okay. November 2nd meeting minutes are approved. Next is follow-up items. So
The only one I could see that really, I think we need to follow up was the one item we talked about in the beginning. There might be others, but revisiting the existing models to better understand the town's potential revenue from rentals. That's on page 6 of 12 on the October 10th meetings, line 36 and 37. So let's keep that in
agreed.
the follow-up area.
Yeah, so Jan, we really do need to do a better job on the quarterly financial communications. So let's get them on the schedule for December, please, so we at least get through the third quarter. Or what, I guess in our case, it's I guess we're in the second fiscal quarter now, so right? So the first quarter, if we have to get that one done. Jan, you there? Hello?
Looks like she's dropped off. But I've got it down.
You
to
got it
put
down,
out.
Alicia? Okay, yeah, I mean, let's get the message to Carrie. We got to do, we're required by law to do it, actually, so we really need to get it out there and get going with it. Okay, to the best of my knowledge, we don't have a reason to go in exec. Polly, is that correct? Do you have anything from your side?
That's correct.
Okay. In which case, I'd like to suggest that we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll
Second.
second.
Okay, Jonathan, second, Carol. Okay. Ralph, how do you feel about going home? We're getting off.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Chris,
Yes.
thank you. Carol
Yes.
and Jonathan.
Definitely yes.
Okay. So meeting is adjourned as of 8:47 PM on November 14th. Thank you all, and appreciate your focus this evening. It's great that we can get through this in under 3 hours, so I'm proud of everybody. So, and good night.
Right.
Happy
you.
Thanksgiving, because we won't talk till after the
Yeah.
holidays. So everybody have a great Thanksgiving.
You too.
All right.
Thank you.